One of 2016 Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump's biggest campaign platforms is his proposal to build a tall wall between the United States and Mexico and terminate all illegal immigration. And he will force Mexico to pay for it by threatening to stifle cash transfers sent from Mexican immigrants to their families back home. Though many who have been following the campaign are left dazed at how a political figure could make such an unrealistic and ridiculous proposal with clearly racist undertones, the history of the militarization of the transnational border goes back almost a century. The El Paso, Texas, Juarez-Mexico borderplex is currently the largest bilingual binational workforce in the Western Hemisphere, with a total of over 4.9 million people. Hundreds of people cross the interlinking Santa Fe International Bridge, the largest point of entry on the border, every day to go to work or visit family, and they're met by an array of surveillance cameras, uniformed and armed officials, and drug dogs. But it wasn't always like this. Before 1917, anyone could cross this bridge without a care in the world. Mike Romo, a resident of El Paso at the time, recalled that there wasn't but one old man and he was half asleep at a soapbox back there. You could bring in whatever you wanted, and they never said anything at all. Then, the explosion of the Mexican Revolution, the entrance of the United States into World War I, and the immigration law of 1917 prompted the creation of a militarized border. El Paso Mayor Tom Lea Sr. and Donald Trump would be best pals, had they been born in the same century. Lea used to wear silk underwear because he believed that Mexican immigrants had typhus, and the silk would protect him from it. He had a sort of germophobia towards Mexican immigrants, and for months sent letters and telegrams to Washington officials to quarantine them at the border to prevent the spread of typhus. Though typhus fever was not a problem in the U.S. at all, Public Health Service official Dr. B.J. Lloyd said a quarantine was impractical, but they could make delousing plans to disinfect crossing Mexicans instead. In 1916, the U.S. Customs accepted this suggestion and granted $6,000 to construct this disinfection plant at the bridge, including bath salts for men and women, a hot steam dryer for killing lice, a vaccination chamber, and a gas chamber for fumigation with pesticides. In 1920, Zyklon B was adopted as the favorite disinfectant at the border, which is extremely poisonous when inhaled or absorbed through the skin. Dr. Gerhard Peters showed its effectiveness as a pesticide in a German pest science journal, which inspired the Nazis to use concentrated Zyklon B in gas chambers to exterminate Jews, gypsies, homosexuals, and other pests. In fact, in 1924, Adolf Hitler praised border procedures used in El Paso. The disinfection ritual had to be repeated every 8 days in order for Mexican workers to be allowed back into the United States. Every immigrant had to strip completely, turn in their clothes and baggage to be steam-dried and fumigated with hydrocyanic acid, and stand before a customs inspector who would check any hair on their bodies for lice. If lice was found, they had to shave all their body hair and apply kerosene and vinegar to their bodies. In a revolt known as the Bath Riots, 17-year-old Juarez maid Carmelita Torres refused to bathe in gasoline and eventually congregated thousands of Mexican women to protest at the bridge. Garancista General Francisco Murguia showed up with his death troops to quell the riot, but his armed men were no match for these feisty Latinas, who jeered, hooted, and attacked the soldiers. Lea also portrayed his germophobia by excluding most working-class Mexican Americans from the electoral process using poll tax violations, destroyed hundreds of Chihuahuita homes to replace them with American-made buildings, and passed the first ordinance in the U.S. against Mexican hemp, aka marijuana, because at the time it was associated with Mexican revolutionaries. From 1915 to 1917, less than 10 El Pasoans had died from typhus lice, but in 1918, more than 10,000 El Pasoans and Mexicans died from the Spanish flu, which came from the Midwestern United States. While the nation was protecting itself from its southern border obsessively, its real threat came from within. Since the 1920s, disinfectant plants have been removed from the border, but the militarization continues. El Paso head of INS, Sylvester Reyes, enforced Operation Blockade in 1993 to guard the border at all times, and the fear of foreigners exacerbated by the September 11, 2001 attacks, along with the American drug war, gave rise to the highly surveilled and regulated border that we know today. So next time you hear Trump tooting on about protecting our country from the dirty Mexicans, know that he's late to the game, and at least he's not suggesting that we gas them with Zyklon B. I'm sure he wears silk underwear too.